There are moments in life when nothing dramatic happens on the outside, and yet inside you something quietly begins to break. You wake up carrying a weight you cannot explain. Conversations feel heavier. Small problems feel strangely overwhelming. Your thoughts move faster than your ability to calm them. Perhaps you have noticed this. The feeling that life is slipping beyond your control. Plans fail. People change. Certainties dissolve. And somewhere deep within you arises a silent question. How do I remain steady when everything around me begins to fall apart? Most people never ask this question consciously. They simply react. They rush. They panic. They blame circumstances, other people, or themselves. But the Stoics understood something few modern minds are taught. Chaos outside you does not have the power to destroy you. Only chaos within you does. Tonight, we will not try to fix your life. We will do something far more powerful. We will learn how to remain calm. Even when life refuses to be calm, you live in a world that trains you to depend on stability. You are told that peace comes from certainty. A secure job, stable relationships, predictable outcomes, approval from others. But reality does not obey these expectations. The modern world moves too fast for emotional preparation. You compare your progress to strangers on glowing screens. You measure your worth through outcomes you cannot fully control. You try to anticipate every future danger, every rejection, every failure, and slowly, without noticing, your mind becomes a battlefield. Overthinking replaces clarity. Reaction replaces reflection. Anxiety replaces presence. You try to control everything because uncertainty feels unbearable. Yet the more control you seek externally, the less control you feel internally. This is the paradox of modern suffering. You are exhausted not because life is difficult. You are exhausted because you are resisting reality itself. The Stoics observed this long before our era of notifications and endless comparison. They saw emperors lose kingdoms, generals lose wars, philosophers lose reputation and comfort, and still some remained calm, not because their lives were easy, but because their minds were disciplined. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire during plague, war, betrayal, and uncertainty, yet he wrote quietly to himself, "You have power over your mind and not outside events." Notice what he did not say. He did not promise safety. He did not promise success. He did not promise control over fate. He pointed inward. The Stoics realized something revolutionary. Calmness is not granted by circumstances. It is built through perception. Events themselves are neutral. Your interpretation gives them emotional force. When life begins to collapse around you, two things happen simultaneously. The event occurs, and then your mind tells a story about the event. The suffering you feel rarely comes from reality itself. It comes from the story. You imagine worst outcomes. You replay conversations. You predict humiliation or loss. Your mind tries to protect you by forecasting danger, but instead it multiplies pain. The Stoic discipline begins here. Separate what happens from what you think about what happens. This simple distinction changes everything. Consider relationships. Someone withdraws emotionally. Immediately the mind reacts. Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? Am I about to be abandoned? The event is small. The interpretation becomes enormous. Or consider work. An unexpected setback occurs. A project fails. Recognition does not come. You begin to question your value, your future, your identity. But the Stoics would ask quietly, did the event damage your character, or only your expectations? Social media intensifies this illusion. You witness curated lives and invisible struggles. You compare your ordinary moments to another person's highlight. You feel behind, insufficient, unstable, yet nothing in your actual life has changed. Only perception has shifted. This is why calm disappears, not because life becomes unbearable, but because perception becomes undisciplined. Perhaps you recognize something uncomfortable now. You may realize that much of your suffering comes from fighting what already exists. You argue internally with reality. You replay what should have happened. You resist what cannot be undone. You cling to outcomes that never belonged fully to you. And beneath it all lies fear. Fear of loss. Fear of insignificance. Fear of uncertainty. The Stoics never denied fear. They simply refused to let fear command their behavior. Epictetus once taught that people are disturbed not by events, but by their judgments about events. This insight can feel unsettling, because it returns responsibility to you. If interpretation creates suffering, then interpretation can also create freedom. But this requires courage. It requires releasing the illusion that life must unfold according to your plans. Calmness begins the moment you stop demanding that life be different from what it is. You breathe. You observe. You step back from reaction. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What part of this is within my control?" Your actions, your character, your response. Nothing more and nothing less. When you narrow your focus to what belongs to you, the mind settles. You stop wasting energy on outcomes. You invest energy in conduct. The Stoics called this inner sovereignty, a state where circumstances may shake the world, but cannot shake your center. You still feel emotion. You still experience difficulty. But you are no longer dragged by every wave. You become the observer within the storm. There comes a deeper stage of calm, not mere acceptance, but something more profound. Amor fati, the love of fate. At first, this idea sounds impossible. How can one love hardship? Yet the Stoics understood that resistance prolongs suffering, while acceptance transforms it. Every challenge refines perception. Every loss clarifies values. Every uncertainty strengthens endurance. What if the events you fear are not interruptions to your life, but essential parts of it? What if adversity is not punishment, but training? When you embrace fate, anxiety loses its grip. You no longer wait for perfect conditions to feel at peace. Peace becomes independent of conditions. This is calm strength, not passive resignation, but dignified participation in reality as it unfolds. You begin to trust yourself more than circumstances. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, life stops feeling like an enemy. Imagine walking through difficulty without internal chaos. You respond instead of react. You listen instead of defend. You act without desperation. Others may misunderstand your calm. They may interpret it as distance. But true calm is not coldness. It is clarity. You conserve emotional energy. You speak less but with intention. You worry less but prepare wisely. Your stability becomes quiet power, and something unexpected happens. When you stop chasing control over life, you gain mastery over yourself. This is the Stoic victory. Invisible, silent, unshakable. Life will continue to change. People will leave. Plans will fail. Uncertainty will return again and again. The Stoics never promised escape from difficulty. They offered something greater, the ability to remain whole within it. Calm is not the absence of storms. It is the discovery that your deepest self was never the storm at all. You may still be standing in the middle of uncertainty right now, but perhaps for the first time, you sense that stability does not come from the world becoming predictable, but from you becoming steady. So tonight, before you leave, consider this quietly. If everything outside your control disappeared tomorrow, who would you become when only your character remained? There is a moment that arrives in every life, a moment when distraction no longer works. You cannot scroll your way out of uncertainty. You cannot reason your way out of loss. You cannot outrun the feeling that something fundamental is changing. And strangely, this moment, the one you may fear, is often the beginning of clarity. Because when life removes illusions, it reveals essentials. The Stoics believe that adversity performs a quiet service. It shows you what was never truly yours. Status can disappear. Approval can vanish. Comfort can dissolve without warning. But character remains. And character is the only possession fate cannot confiscate. You may have noticed that the most composed people are rarely those with the easiest lives, and they are those who have endured difficulty without surrendering themselves to bitterness. They have learned something subtle. Calmness is not emotional suppression. It is emotional understanding. You do not become calm by eliminating feeling. You become calm by refusing to be ruled by feeling. There is a difference. When anger rises, the untrained mind becomes anger. When fear appears, the untrained mind becomes fear. But the Stoic learns to pause, to observe, to create a small space between impulse and action. Inside that space lives freedom. Socrates often stood silently before responding to criticism or accusation, not because he lacked words, but because he understood that immediate reaction belongs to instinct, while thoughtful response belongs to wisdom. Modern life rarely allows this pause. You are encouraged to react instantly. Instant opinions, instant replies, instant judgments, and so the nervous system never rests. You remain internally alert, even when no real danger exists. This constant readiness becomes anxiety. Calmness begins when you reclaim the pause. When something unsettling happens, imagine stepping back internally. You watch your thoughts instead of obeying them. You notice the emotion without announcing it as truth. You remind yourself quietly, this is an impression, not reality. This single habit reshapes the mind. Consider how often suffering comes from imagined futures. You rehearse conversations that never occur. You fear outcomes that never arrive. You prepare emotionally for disasters that remain hypothetical. The Stoics called this unnecessary suffering. They believed that most human distress lives not in the present moment, but in anticipation. Right now, in this moment, you are breathing. You are here. And despite everything that concerns you, this moment is survivable. The mind becomes calm when it returns to what exists rather than what might exist. This is not denial. It is precision. You deal with reality only when reality arrives. Until then, you conserve energy. There is also another truth rarely spoken. When life collapses around you, identity begins to shift. You may lose roles that once defined you. A relationship ends. A career changes. A direction disappears. And suddenly you ask, who am I without these things? The Stoics prepared for this question long before it arrived. They practiced internal independence. Not isolation, but freedom from over-attachment. They loved deeply, worked diligently, participated fully in life. Yet they remembered that all external things are temporary visitors. Nothing external defines your worth permanently. You are not your success. You are not your failure. You are not the opinion of others. You are the quality of your choices. When identity moves inward, calm follows naturally, because what depends on you cannot abandon you. Perhaps you have noticed how suffering often intensifies when you resist change. The mind says, this should not be happening, but reality does not negotiate. The Stoics did not waste strength arguing with inevitability. Instead, they aligned themselves with it. Amor fati, love of fate, does not mean liking hardship. It means recognizing that resistance prolongs pain, while cooperation transforms it into growth. Imagine standing in heavy rain. You can curse the sky or you can walk through it. The rain continues either way. Acceptance does not weaken you. It liberates your energy for action. Once you stop fighting what already exists, you regain strength to shape what comes next. Calm people are often misunderstood. Others assume they feel less. In truth, they feel deeply, but they are not desperate for life to obey their expectations. They understand impermanence. They understand that every moment carries both creation and loss. This awareness softens the ego. You no longer need constant validation. You no longer panic when outcomes shift. You become grounded. And grounding creates presence. You listen more carefully. You notice small details. You respond thoughtfully. Your calm becomes contagious. Without speaking about philosophy, you embody it. There is a quiet dignity in enduring difficulty, without dramatic display. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that hardship was not an interruption of life. It was life itself. Every morning you enter uncertainty. Every day contains elements you did not choose. Yet within each day exists an opportunity to practice self-command. You can choose patience instead of irritation, understanding instead of resentment, silence instead of unnecessary conflict. These small choices accumulate. Calmness is built gradually, like strength in a muscle rarely noticed until needed. And when true adversity arrives, you discover that you are already prepared. You may wonder whether calmness makes life less passionate. The opposite is true. When fear and reaction fade, appreciation deepens. You experience moments more fully, because you are not constantly protecting yourself from imagined threats. You become present with people, present with work, present with yourself. Peace does not remove intensity from life. It removes unnecessary suffering from it. Eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop asking life to be easy, and instead you become capable. This shift changes everything. You no longer wait for stability before feeling at peace. You carry stability within you. External collapse no longer feels like personal destruction. It becomes transformation. You realize that many chapters must end so others may begin. and you begin to trust your own endurance. There is a calm strength available to every human being, not dramatic, not visible to crowds, but deeply powerful. It is the strength of someone who understands. I cannot control events, but I can govern myself. And self-governance creates freedom no circumstance can remove. So as you move forward from this moment, perhaps life around you will still feel uncertain. Problems may remain unresolved. Questions may still linger, but something subtle may have changed. You may notice a quieter mind, a slower breath, a sense that you no longer need the world to calm down before you do. And maybe, just maybe, you begin to understand what the Stoics meant when they said, "The strongest person is not the one who controls the world, but the one who remains steady within it." Let me leave you with a question to carry into your own reflection tonight. If calmness became your greatest strength, how differently would you meet the next difficulty life places before you? There is another stage of calmness that few people reach, because it requires letting go of something deeply human, the need to be certain. You may have spent much of your life trying to predict what comes next. You plan carefully, you analyze possibilities, you prepare for outcomes you hope to control, and yet life repeatedly reminds you that certainty is fragile. The Stoics did not search for certainty, they searched for readiness. Readiness is different. Certainty says, nothing will go wrong. Readiness says, whatever happens, I will meet it with composure. One depends on the world behaving correctly. The other depends on your character remaining steady. When life begins to collapse, uncertainty expands, and the untrained mind interprets uncertainty as danger. But uncertainty is not always danger. Often it is simply the space where transformation begins. Every meaningful change first appears as instability. A seed must break before it grows. An identity must loosen before it evolves. A familiar life must shift before a deeper one emerges. What feels like collapse may actually be transition. But transition feels uncomfortable because it removes familiar structures. The mind searches desperately for something solid. And this is where Stoic calm becomes essential. You stop demanding answers immediately. You allow life to unfold without rushing its meaning. You become patient with uncertainty. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active trust. The Stoics practiced imagining loss, not to become pessimistic, but to become free. They reminded themselves that everything external is temporary, not to create sadness, but gratitude. When you accept impermanence, fear softens. You appreciate what exists without clinging to it. You engage fully while understanding that change is inevitable. This balance produces emotional resilience. You stop panicking when circumstances shift because you already understand the nature of change. Nothing surprises you emotionally. And calmness grows from familiarity with reality. There is also a quiet courage required to remain calm when others are not. In moments of collective stress, workplaces in chaos, relationships in conflict, social tension everywhere, emotional contagion spreads quickly. Fear moves from person to person. Anger multiplies. Panic becomes normalized. The Stoic refuses to participate unconsciously. You observe emotional storms without absorbing them. You listen without becoming defensive. You remain grounded while others react impulsively. This does not mean detachment from humanity. It means leadership of self. Calm individuals stabilize environments without announcing their influence. People feel safer around them. Conversations slow. Conflicts soften. Presence replaces pressure. Without trying to dominate situations, calmness quietly transforms them. You may begin to notice something subtle in your own life. When you remain calm, decisions improve. You see options previously hidden by emotion. You respond strategically rather than impulsively. Many mistakes in life are not caused by lack of intelligence, but by emotional urgency. The Stoics trained themselves to delay reaction precisely for this reason. Emotion narrows perception. Calm expands it. An expanded perception leads to wiser action. There is also freedom in accepting that you cannot control how others perceive you. Much internal turmoil comes from managing impressions. You worry about misunderstanding. You replay interactions. You attempt to control reputation. Yet the Stoics recognize that other minds remain outside your authority. You can act with integrity. You cannot control interpretation. When you release the need to manage opinions, enormous energy returns to you. You become simpler, more authentic, less divided internally, and calmness follows naturally. when you no longer carry the impossible burden of universal approval. Perhaps the deepest lesson appears when hardship persists longer than expected. Some storms do not pass quickly. Some periods of life feel prolonged, heavy, uncertain. Here Stoicism becomes endurance. Endurance is not dramatic strength. It is quiet persistence. Waking up again, acting well again, maintaining dignity again, day after day. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the obstacle itself becomes the path. Difficulty shapes capability. Without resistance, strength cannot form. Without uncertainty, wisdom cannot deepen. Without challenge, character remains theoretical. The calm person understands this. They do not ask why hardship exists. They ask who they are becoming through it. Over time, a profound shift occurs. You stop viewing life as something happening to you. You begin experiencing life as something happening with you. Events become teachers rather than enemies. Pain becomes information. Failure becomes refinement. And even loss carries meaning. Amor fati emerges not as an idea, but as lived experience. You recognize that every chapter, even difficult ones, participates in shaping a fuller human being. This realization brings peace not because life becomes easier, but because resistance disappears. You may notice now a quieter relationship with yourself, less internal argument, less urgency, more observation. You begin to trust your ability to endure uncertainty without losing yourself. Calmness becomes familiar, not forced, not fragile, simply present. And perhaps the greatest discovery is this: calmness was never something you needed to acquire. It was something uncovered once fear, resistance, and expectation loosened their grip. Beneath reaction, your mind already knew how to be still. So when life feels as if it is collapsing again, and it will, in some form, remember gently, you do not need to control the storm. You need only remain steady within it. You breathe, you observe, you act with dignity, and you allow time, fate, and character to do their work together. Before we part, sit with this quietly. If peace depended only on your response, not on your circumstances, how would you choose to live starting tomorrow? There is a moment, often unnoticed, when calmness stops being something you practice and becomes something you are. It does not arrive suddenly. There is no dramatic realization, no visible transformation. Instead, you begin responding differently to situations that once disturbed you. An unexpected problem appears, and you breathe before reacting. Someone misunderstands you, and you feel no urgent need to defend yourself. Plans change, and your mind adjusts without resistance. The external world remains unpredictable, but internally something has stabilized. The Stoics believed this stability came from living in agreement with nature. Not nature as forests or oceans, but human nature itself. They observed that life moves through cycles, gain and loss, beginning and ending, growth and decline. Suffering intensifies when we expect permanence in a world built upon change. Calmness emerges when expectation aligns with reality. You no longer demand that life remain fixed. You move with it, like a sailor who cannot control the wind, but learns to guide the sail. Many people believe calmness requires isolation from difficulty. They imagine peace exists somewhere far away from responsibility, pressure, or uncertainty. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Calmness is tested and strengthened precisely within difficulty. You do not wait for a peaceful life to become peaceful. You cultivate peace while life remains imperfect. Every conversation becomes practice. Every inconvenience becomes training. Every delay becomes an opportunity to observe your mind. Gradually, life itself becomes your teacher, not through comfort, but through participation. You may also notice a change in how you relate to time. When overwhelmed, the mind rushes toward the future. It asks endlessly, what will happen next? How long will this last? When will things feel normal again? But calm individuals return attention to the present moment, not as an escape, but as a grounding point. The present moment is the only place where action exists. The past cannot be altered. The future cannot be controlled. Yet the present allows dignity. Right now you can choose patience. Right now you can choose clarity. Right now you can choose composure. And when enough present moments are lived wisely, a stable life emerges naturally. There is also a quiet freedom in accepting your limits. Modern culture encourages constant optimization. You are told to improve endlessly, achieve endlessly, become endlessly more. But the Stoics recognize that peace requires acknowledging human limitation. You cannot be perfect. You cannot foresee every consequence. You cannot prevent all pain. And surprisingly, accepting limitation reduces anxiety. You stop demanding impossible standards from yourself. You act sincerely rather than perfectly. You forgive your own humanity. And calmness deepens when self-judgment softens. Consider how often anger arises from violated expectations. You expected fairness. You expected appreciation. You expected understanding. When reality differs, frustration appears. But the Stoics trained themselves to expect imperfection. They reminded themselves each morning, you will meet impatience. You will meet misunderstanding. You will meet selfishness. Not to become cynical, but prepared. When difficulty arrives, it feels familiar rather than shocking. Preparation protects peace. You remain calm not because the world improves, but because your expectations become realistic. There is another layer of strength that develops quietly. You begin to distinguish between urgency and importance. Many things demand immediate attention. Very few deserve emotional disturbance. The calm mind learns to respond proportionally. Not every disagreement is a crisis. Not every setback defines your future. Not every opinion deserves emotional investment. This discernment conserves energy, and energy conserved becomes resilience. You move through life less exhausted because you no longer treat every event as equally significant. At some point, you may recognize that calmness changes how you experience success as well. You enjoy achievements without becoming dependent on them. You appreciate praise without needing it. You welcome progress without fearing loss. Success stops feeling fragile because your identity no longer rests on outcomes alone. The Stoics sought this inner independence, a state where joy is allowed, but attachment does not enslave. You participate fully in life while remaining internally free. Perhaps the most profound transformation occurs in your relationship with fear. Fear does not disappear, but it loses authority. You feel uncertainty and still act. You feel discomfort and remain steady. You face change without abandoning yourself. Courage in Stoic understanding is not absence of fear. It is calm action despite it. And each time you respond with composure rather than panic, confidence grows quietly. Not loud confidence, not performance, but deep trust in your own endurance. You realize you have survived many storms already, and this knowledge brings peace. Eventually, calmness becomes less about controlling emotions and more about understanding life. You recognize that difficulty refines awareness. You recognize that loss teaches appreciation. You recognize that uncertainty invites growth, and you stop asking life to spare you from challenge. Instead, you allow challenge to shape you. This is inner sovereignty, a freedom that exists regardless of circumstance, a stability that cannot be taken away. If you listen carefully now, you may notice something within yourself has slowed. Your breathing feels quieter, your thoughts less urgent. Nothing outside may have changed, yet your relationship with it has softened. And that is where real calm begins, not in changing the world, but in changing how you stand within it. So when life feels uncertain again, and it will, remember gently, you do not need to solve everything at once. You only need to meet the present moment with clarity. One decision, one breath, one calm response at a time. And over days, months, years, these small moments of self-command become a life of quiet strength. Let us end together in stillness. Imagine facing the next challenge not with tension, but with grounded awareness. Imagine responding instead of reacting. Imagine trusting that whatever comes, you possess the capacity to remain steady. And consider this final reflection. If nothing outside you could guarantee peace, what inner qualities would you begin cultivating today? Before we leave this conversation, allow yourself one final moment of stillness, not to learn anything new, but simply to notice what has changed within you while listening. Perhaps nothing dramatic happened. There was no sudden revelation, no overwhelming surge of motivation, no promise that life will now become easy. And yet, something may feel quieter, as if the urgency that followed you all day has softened, as if the world has slowed just enough for you to breathe again. This is how real transformation begins, not through intensity, through recognition. The Stoics never attempted to escape life. They learned to stand inside it with dignity. They understood that calmness is not a destination reached once and forever. It is a practice renewed each morning. Each difficulty invites the same choice. Will you react, or will you respond? Will you resist reality, or walk alongside it? Life will continue to unfold in ways you cannot predict. There will be moments of confusion, moments when plans dissolve, moments when you feel misunderstood, uncertain, or alone. But now you know something essential. You do not need perfect circumstances to remain whole. Your stability does not come from controlling events. It comes from remembering who governs your inner world. You, not fate, not opinion, not circumstance, only you. And when this understanding settles deeply enough, fear begins to lose its urgency. You stop fighting every change. You stop interpreting every challenge as personal defeat. You begin to meet life the way a seasoned sailor meets the sea, not demanding calm waters, but trusting your ability to navigate waves. There is profound peace in this trust, because it means nothing that happens outside you has the authority to define your inner state without your permission. Calmness becomes a form of freedom, a quiet independence. You walk through crowded days without losing yourself. You face uncertainty without collapsing into it. You experience emotion without becoming imprisoned by it. And perhaps the greatest realization arrives softly. You were never fragile. You were only untrained. Now you begin to see differently. You notice when anger rises and you pause. You notice when fear speaks and you listen without obeying. You notice when life shifts, and instead of panic, curiosity appears. You begin to live deliberately, not perfectly, but consciously. The Stoics believed that a good life was not measured by comfort or achievement, but by alignment between action and character. And calmness is the visible sign of that alignment. It is the expression of a person who has made peace with uncertainty, a person who understands that hardship is not proof of failure, but proof of participation in existence itself. So tonight, as this conversation ends, nothing external needs to change. Your problems may still exist. Your questions may remain unanswered, but you carry something new forward. The awareness that calm is always available to you, not as an escape from life, but as a way of meeting it. Return to your breath when the mind rushes. Return to perception when emotions intensify. Return to character when circumstances become unstable. Again and again. This is the Stoic path, quiet, enduring, timeless. And now, before you go, sit with this final question, not to answer quickly, but to reflect upon honestly. When the next storm arrives, will you try to control the storm? Or will you become the calm that outlasts it?